Hey, thanks for joining us today on Cinema Recap. Today we're going to take a look at that 2021 horror thriller called Old, where a family on a tropical holiday discover that a secluded beach where they were relaxing for a few hours is somehow aging them rapidly, reducing their entire lives into a single day. Spoilers ahead. Now, can you imagine your life flashing by in the blink of an eye? It's exactly what happened to the Kappa family when they get a cheap vacation to a resort too good to be true. You see, they're the Kappas, which include Priska, Guy, and their two children, Maddox and Trent, which are treated like royalty from the moment they arrive. The couple receive specially curated cocktails while Maddox and Trent are led to a kid-friendly candy station.
Can you believe I found this online?
And there Trent meets Idlib, another kid around his age. Idlib stays at the hotel all year because his uncle's the manager, and the two children become fast friends. The family checks into the room and the kids jump into bathing suits, heading out to the resort's beach. Trent's idea of a fun time is running around interrogating adults on what they do for a living, and they are charmed by the 6-year-old.
What are your names and what do you do for a living?
It seems like the start of a perfect vacation. But that night, we see Guy and Priska arguing. Apparently, they're planning on divorcing, and don't really know how to break it to the kids. Thus, they arrange this vacation, hoping to tell them after it's over. We also find out that Priska has some kind of medical issue, but she's brushing it off as something they'll deal with when the time comes. Now, while they're fighting, the kids are listening from their own bedroom. They can't hear specifics, but they're understanding that there's a fight. And to distract themselves, they play a message decoding game that Idlib taught them. The next morning, we meet other families over breakfast. There's the gorgeous Crystal, her husband Charles, and their 6-year-old daughter Kara. Oh, and Charles brought his mother Agnes along as well. We also get to know Patricia and Jaron Carmichael. Patricia suffers from epilepsy.
I'm a doctor.
Causing her to have a seizure during breakfast, but it's resolved quickly because her husband Jaron is a nurse. Now, as they're eating, the resort manager tells the Kappa family about an exclusive, secluded beach nearby, and he mentions that he usually doesn't tell anybody about it, but since he likes their family so much, he's already gone through the trouble of arranging food and transportation to take them there. He's coming off a little strong, but Guy and Priska are convinced, so they agree. Now, after breakfast, the Kappas are loaded onto a big bus, but find that Crystal and her family are also boarding. So much for being exclusive. And the bus drives into a nature reserve, completely ignoring a sign that says off limits, and eventually dropping off the families at a clearing. The driver points them in a direction of the beach, but curiously enough refuses to take them there himself or help with their bags. Furthermore, he's packed them a big basket of food, far more than they'd need for just a half-day's trip at the beach. He explains that he'll be back at 5, and then hurriedly drives off. Without a shred of apprehension, the two families amble through the trees and into a narrow cavern, which eventually opens up to a beautiful hidden beach, just as the resort manager promised. The cove is entirely secluded, with the exception of one man sitting on a rock nearby. Maddox quickly notices the man on the rock, and it's none other than Mid-Size Sedan, a popular rapper. That's right, you heard me. His name is Mid-Sized Sedan. The kids play in the ocean while Priska warns them not to get too close to the coral. Even with such beautiful scenery, tensions are still high between the adults. Priska and Guy can't stop bickering, and Charles has had it up to here with Crystal's selfie taking. As the kids are playing, they notice more and more oddities, like rusty old utensils that litter the beach, or the fact that there aren't any fish in the water. And as Trent's playing, a blonde head floats up behind him. Well, he screams. His father rushes to investigate. Charles is a surgeon, and Guy is actually specializing in insurance fraud, so they're the most equipped to deal with this dead body. Together, they drag it to the beach. Charles immediately points to Sedan as the culprit. And before you call him racist, Charles does make a good argument. After all, Sedan was the only other person on the beach, and not only that, his nose keeps bleeding. Maybe he got into a fight with the blonde lady, and then threw her into the ocean. Sedan tries to explain that they were just hanging out on the beach when this blonde went missing. But Charles isn't believing him, and as they fight, Priska's trying to get her kids away from the corpse, but Trent keeps complaining that his swimsuit feels too tight. Agnes also is feeling weird, noticing that her chest hurts. Charles tries to call for help, but there's no reception on the beach. Just then, the couple from earlier, the Carmichaels, appear from the cavern. They were actually supposed to be with everybody else, but caught a later bus. Jaren heads into the cavern, hoping to stop the bus driver from leaving, but walking through the cavern makes him black out. He regains consciousness on the beach, complaining about a raging headache. Meanwhile, Crystal realizes that Agnes has stopped breathing. Jaren tries to help. Him a trained nurse, his wife a psychologist, but it's too late for Agnes. Seems that in a span of just a moment,
You're 11, right, Trent?
2 bodies have been discovered. Trent and Maddox too are changing. Trent's voice is suddenly so much deeper, and Jaren refuses to believe that he's just 6 years old. The camera pans around and we see that the kids are somehow a lot older, that they're near impossible to recognize. So as chaos peaks, Sedan makes a run for it, and Charles races after him. But just like before with Jaren, they can't seem to leave the canyon at all, instead emerging back on the beach with roaring headaches. This pain is like intense cranial pressure, as if they were deep underwater. Now that the 3 people have blacked out while trying to leave, Priska suggests that they find another way off the beach. But they just end up blacking out every time they get near to that canyon. So basically they're stuck on this beach with 2 dead bodies, and the kids are rapidly going through all the food. Charles is losing his temper, taking a knife and cutting open Sedan's cheek. However, in mere minutes, the cut heals over, leaving just a scar.
Stay right here.
By now, we figured out what's going on. The adults are still clueless, with Priska and Charles blaming some sort of virus in the air. Both the kids are now teenagers. Agnes's dog is dead, and there's no way to swim out of the cove, especially considering how heavy those waves are. And as the adults ponder on what to do next, Sedan tells Maddox that he has an illness which prevents his blood from clotting. We also find out that the dead woman they found in the ocean had multiple sclerosis. Jaren and Patricia suggest that everyone gathers together, because if they all pool their knowledge, they might figure out what's going on, or at the very least, stop from going crazy. However, Priska's side starts to hurt, and it's revealed that she's had a tumor for quite a while. This medical issue was one of the reasons that her marriage to Guy was falling apart. But before they came to the beach, it was small and benign. Now it's the size of a softball, getting bigger with every passing second. And as that tumor inflates like a balloon, Priska passes out. Charles is forced to pull out a knife and conduct surgery right there on the beach. He makes an incision, but just like before with Sedan, the cut heals instantly. And that's not the only problem. Charles starts talking to voices in his head. He's had symptoms of schizophrenia for a while.
What is he saying?
But the beach is exacerbating it, making it hard to trust him with such a delicate operation. Somehow, with Jaren cheering him on, Charles gets a grip. He makes that cut again, but this time everyone holds the sides of the incision open with their sandy fingers, giving Charles time to remove that tumor. In seconds, Priska wakes up, noting that she feels much better. And as the sight of the cantaloupe-sized tumor wasn't gross enough, Sedan goes to check on the body of the blonde woman.
We all agree I didn't do that.
And finds it already decomposed, as if it's been out there for years. Priska's a museum curator, meaning that, she has a lot of experience with old stuff. She calculates that the body looks like it's been decomposing for like 7 years. Finally, they realize that time is moving faster on the beach. Much, much faster. Just half an hour is the equivalent to a year of their lives, if Priska's calculation's right. That's why the kids are so hungry, because they have to grow a lot of mass in a very short amount of time. Jaren hypothesizes that it has something to do with the rocks surrounding the beach, and that also must be why it's impossible to leave. Charles says it's nonsense, but then they realize something. It's been a long time since they've seen Trent and Kara. They start searching, and eventually they find the 2 kids down on the shoreline, eating from the remaining food bag. Not only are both of them adults, but Kara is heavily pregnant, getting larger every second. By what Priska's saying, she'll give birth any moment. So now Charles tries to help Kara give birth, all the while battling the voices in his head. Guy's explaining to Trent that his playing with Kara got her pregnant.
It's Kara, right?
And Trent's still mentally a 6-year-old, so he's not quite grasping this concept. Crystal runs off to get help, but predictably she passes out. And when she comes back to consciousness, her daughter has given birth, but the baby dies just minutes later. You see, time's moving too fast for something as fragile as a newborn to survive. And things go from bad to worse. Charles loses what little grip he had of his sanity and attacks Sedan with a knife. The worst target that he could possibly choose, cause Sedan's blood can't clot, so he dies instantly. Crystal runs off when she realizes that aging includes wrinkles, and Kara's left off on her own to grieve for her newborn. Sure, she was only pregnant for 20 minutes, but it still sucks. Jaren decides that swimming out to the water may give him a fighting chance to survive, so he sets out, leaving Guy, Patricia, and Priska as the only real adults left.
I'm just going.
And as Guy's trying to take the knife from Charles, he's realizing something and shares the thought with his wife. Every family had at least one person who was sick. For their family, it was Priska's tumor. Then there was Charles's schizophrenia and Patricia's epilepsy. Even the loners, like the blonde woman and Sedan, had illnesses. He's asking his wife how she heard about the resort, and she explains that she found it through a random sweepstakes on the back of her pharmacy receipt. This means that they knew their medical history. Now later, Maddox confronts her mother about the divorce she was planning. Priska confesses, explaining that there was someone else in her life, but Guy never knew. Maddox tries to be strong, wading out into the ocean to think, but that's when a body bumps into her. It's Jaren's. He must have gone unconscious swimming, and then he drowned, which is probably what happened to the blonde woman. Simply swimming far enough can cause a blackout. Meanwhile, Kara tries to climb out of the cove. Trent follows her, but he's pulled by his mother. Kara keeps climbing, and as she gets close to the ledge, she blacks out, falls, dies instantly. After Kara's death, Guy proclaims that they should all just stick together, and then Patricia has a series of seizures and dies. With her gone, it's just the Kappa family left. Oh, and Crystal, who's down in a cave somewhere that no one can see her face. Night kicks in. The family sets a fire. Guy notices that his vision's fading, while Priska starts losing her hearing. Now, sitting close to each other, Guy tells her that he's always known about the affair, and isn't really mad about it. Well, not anymore. She says that there's no place she'd rather be than with him, her husband. And as they share this sweet moment of peace, Maddox and Trent unearth a bunch of notebooks. It's from other people who've gotten trapped there. Just like their group, the previous one was composed of others with medical issues, and the notebook has all their names and addresses written down. It also has a few diary entries, where the writer's explaining that he thinks it's something to do with the rocks on the beach. Their particular deposits of special minerals can cause cells to age at a rapid rate. So Trent's wondering that if they make some kind of metal tube, then they'd be safe from the effects of the rocks. It's definitely the kind of idea only a 6-year-old would think of, so Maddox ignores it. Then they realize that this shiny object reflecting off a far-off cliff is a camera, leaving no doubt that they're being recorded.
Maddox, that's a camera.
Back at the campfire, Charles, who we totally forgot was still alive, is creeping up on Guy. But Guy's near blind now, so he's not seeing him coming. Charles attacks, and it takes a while for Priska to notice because she can't hear the noise. Charles keeps slashing at Guy, but the knife cut heals quickly each time. Priska finally notices, and the first thing she does is warn the kids. The kids run off to a nearby crevice, and that's where they find Crystal. Trent tries to light a match, but Crystal attacks him for it, terrified that her aged face will be seen. She throws rocks at the kids, but her bones are weak and break, healing in the wrong ways and turning the once beautiful woman into a grotesque monster just before she dies. Meanwhile, Priska saves her husband by attacking Charles with a rusted knife. The rust on the knife acts like poison, infecting the bloodstream and killing him instantly. And with that, the Kappa family are truly the last ones left standing. They huddle together by the fire for the final moments. Guy tells Priska that whatever they're fighting about, he doesn't even remember it. He also doesn't recall why they wanted to leave the beach. After all, it's so beautiful. Well, dementia sets in, and Guy dies, with Priska following shortly after.
Mom?
By morning, Trent and Maddox are in their late 30s, waiting around to die with no chance to be saved. Instead of scrambling to survive, they decide to build a sandcastle instead. And as these children in adult-sized bodies play, Trent idly recalls that Idlib sent him a message to decode. But Trent never got around to it. Maddox laughs and asks him to decode it now, seeing as they have nothing better to do. And Trent does so. They finally get the message that reads, "My uncle doesn't like the coral." Was Idlib trying to warn him or save him? Well, perhaps they're wondering that the coral is the secret. With little time left to doubt that, they wade out into the sea and towards that coral, where they find an underwater tunnel. Maddox's shirt gets caught on a piece of coral and they try in vain to pull it free as they run out of air. Meanwhile, someone with binoculars is looking for him. It's the bus driver, whose name is apparently Theo. He's waiting, but they're not resurfacing, and he radios in telling him that they drowned.
Are you sure they didn't make it?
The person on the line asked if he's sure, because he doesn't want another incident, but Theo is sure of it. With the final members of Trial 73 now deceased, Theo packs up his equipment and returns to base, a high-tech lab full of scientists. The resort manager's there, and he calls for a moment of silence for the fallen members of Trial 73. He reminds everyone that because of this strange beach, they've been able to save thousands of lives with new medicines. Apparently, the resort is actually a facade for a drug company, and they use the beach to speed through clinical trials of new medicine, learning if it works in just days, as opposed to a lifetime it would take in a normal scenario. The welcome drinks that the families got when they arrived are actually spiked with trial medicine for each of their particular illnesses. Remember when Trent was 6 years old running around on the beach asking everyone what their job was? That information is exactly what he needed. As the adult Trent, miraculously alive, hands a vacationing police officer the journal that they found. He looks through it and notices that the names inside are all the people who've gone missing. So it turns out that Trent Maddox survived in the underwater cave, which emptied out to the resort beach. And using the notebook as evidence, they managed to bring the police to the resort, getting the entire drug company busted. A chopper arrives and the cop takes the two survivors home. And that wraps it up. Old, produced by Perfect World Pictures in 2021, starring Gail Garcia Berna, Vicky Creeps, and Rufus Sewell. Also directed by the plot twist king himself, M. Night Shyamalan. Always with the moral, ethical dilemmas, this guy. But nonetheless, a good one. Do you think the results of the experiment, saving the lives of millions with new medicine, is worth luring dozens of innocent families to their death? Let us know what you think with the hashtag Cinema Recap in the comments. Again, thanks for watching. Till next time.